All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carl Leduc, and today I'm joined by Ed Coates. Ed is a senior UI artist working at Double 11. It's a developer-publisher hybrid that are known for working on games such as Rust and Minecraft Dungeons and many others that we'll get into. But Ed is also the creator of a website called the Game UI Database, and it's an amazing resource for game developers to get inspiration from other popular games and how their UI is displayed in the games and in the menus. And it's free. They've got over 400 titles and 15,000 screenshots. It's really intuitive and well tagged and filtered. I'd highly recommend looking at it. It's awesome, and we'll talk about that a bit today. So yeah, we'll also talk to Ed about his work as a UI artist, his work that he's done as a public speaker for BAFTA and things like that. And also, yeah, just talking about his project with Game UI Database and where he's planning to take that this year. So thanks for joining me today, Ed.
Thanks for having me.
So this is really cool because I found out about you a few months ago through the Game UI Database, and I loved that resource. I love just exploring it. I'm not a big gamer anymore. I used to be in my childhood, but I'm not anymore. And a resource like Game UI Database is so good for me to be able to get access to these games and how they look without having to buy them and kind of spend hours and hours researching them. So I appreciate you putting that resource out, which is really cool. But what's interesting is I found out later that you actually did work as a UI artist for Before We Leave, which is an indie studio in New Zealand. And they've just launched, they're launching on Steam later this year. And I'd love to, that's my first question to you is what was working for Balancing Monkey Games on Before We Leave like, and how did you get that job? Because you're currently based in the UK.
So funny enough, I found that job through Facebook. So I'm a member of a big indie game community on there called Indie Game Devs. Cool. And yeah, so essentially like a lot of us on there are very like, we're very like active with sort of indie games and stuff, and we talk about them, we discuss them and stuff. And yeah, the guy who with I'm blanking on the name. Like I'm trying to open Discord in the background because I keep forgetting. I'm really bad with names, by the way, like really bad.
The creator of Before We Leave.
You what? Sorry.
Are you asking about the creator of Before We Leave?
Yeah. I thought I could put it up like opening Discord in the background, but like I'm terrible at multitasking, so I'm just gonna be honest. I'm just looking for his name.
That's fine. Well, I'll put him in the notes down below, and people can.
Yeah. I'll say later. Yeah. But, so yeah, he posted on Facebook like looking for a UI artist, and I applied for the job. And the first time around, I didn't get the job, and someone else came in. Then they sort of became like a main artist, and then they were looking for like another UI artist. So like a few months later, he came back to me and said, "Do you want to join the project?" So I was like, "Yeah, of course, hell yeah."
Cool.
And at that point, I didn't realize it was an Epic Store exclusive. I thought it was just a little indie game that was very, very pretty.
Yeah.
So you know, I was really hyped about it. And then when I saw it on, like, I googled it, and when I saw it like on, it was in the trailer for the Game Awards. And I saw it like as an Epic Store exclusive and all that kind of. And at that point, it was the biggest thing I've worked on. So you know, for me, it was like incredibly exciting. You know, and also like when while I'm building up my career, I'm a big believer in like keywords, as in like things you can drop into conversation that give you some sort of notoriety, gives you people pay more attention to you kind of thing, because you're always kind of like selling yourself before you get there, right? You know, the whole make it. Fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like my keywords for this were like Epic Store exclusive and Game Awards trailer, and all these kinds of. So I immediately like hooked on to those things, and I was just like, oh my god, yes, this is my in.
Nice.
Kind of thing.
So what did you do as like what kind of UI did you work on? What was your kind of most memorable part of that project?
I mean, the game was beautiful, so I just loved working on the HUD for that game. A lot of the style was like established before I joined the project, because like we had the artists before sort of like do a lot of the stuff anyway. So like I was really sort of more on sort of UX than UI on that one.
Yeah.
But I did fill in a lot of the gaps and and sort of improve things here and there, and give it a bit of polish. But yeah, it was just really lovely working with such a beautiful game and such lovely artwork, so you rarely get, as an indie developer, you rarely get that chance,
Mm.
so and yeah, it was just nice being able to stand behind a project that have of that quality.
Yeah, no, that is really cool, and everyone in New Zealand in the community here is really proud of it, and seeing the kind
Mm.
of moves that they're making. So that's really cool. How did you get into UI? I'm curious to know like your story as an artist and getting into gaming as well. I'd love to know like what was your path like getting your first job in the industry?
So funny enough, so I actually did a computer science degree. I was actually a programmer for a long time.
Hmm.
But I absolutely hated it. Like, it was like destroying my soul from the inside out. So yeah, I sort of wanted to look into like other kind of avenues, kind of thing. So in my 20s, I had a breakdown. A close friend of mine passed away. I had a really bad breakdown. I was diagnosed with OCD and depression.
Wow.
I was on benefits for like 8 years. I couldn't even leave the house for a very long time. I was in quite intensive therapy. So yeah, I mean, I'm a late bloomer, really. I'm 36 now, so um, but like while I was like unwell, like I was working on my own stuff. So I was working on like this kind of passion project called Metaverse Legends.
Hmm.
Like, it's a sort of a meme in the games industry community. It's like, everyone's first game's an MMO, and it was an MMO. And surprisingly it didn't get finished.
Biggest
But
scale game you can think of.
yeah, but you learn a lot from doing silly stuff like that, and one of the things I really hated the most about making this game was the UI, because I just found it so difficult. But I'm a really stubborn person, so the thing that I found most difficult, it kind of fascinated me, and I wanted to get better at it. So I really delved deep into it. I did all the research. I looked at other games and I tore them apart, meticulously. Sort of looking at the font, like the font usage and the typography, and looking at the color usage and looking at patterns from different games. And I suppose that's where the sort of and that analytic thing from the database comes in. That's how I've always seen games as a computer scientist going
Mm.
into an artistic field. I've got a very logical view of it.
Yeah.
So I look at all these different very objective aspects of the design, like you've used this pattern here and this material here, but anyway, jumping ahead. so
That's cool.
so like yeah, like I sort of analyzed it and looked at it and learned that way, kind of thing. And then eventually I got my first freelance gig, just working on a really small thing when I was 30. And it was a really, really, really small project. I was paid like £80 for it, but it was still the first thing I'd ever gotten paid for. So for me, it was like wow, I've
Game
made something,
changer.
gotten paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's the dream, man. Kind of thing. So after that, it was like, it was just up and up. I was like using that to on my portfolio to get more work. And there's always like a lot of luck involved, depending on who you meet and, whether you're in the right place at the right time and all that. And fortunately, I met a few people who introduced me to Drummond Park, which is a company in the UK. They produce board games. So they produced the board game Articulate, which is quite big in the UK.
Yeah.
So we got to work with the creators of Articulate on a mobile game. That was a very turbulent process because we were all quite sort of green, really, when it came to making something of that scale, kind of thing. But it was a lot of fun. And then after that, I got working on another small project, and they like hired me full time for a bit, and then that company went bankrupt, and I was sort of like set adrift. Like, I didn't really have any leads, didn't have any
Hmm.
kind of thing. So I was just like, what now, kind of thing, like, is this it, but I used that opportunity as like a reset. So I rebranded myself. Like, I made a website, like edcoatesdesign.com. I
Hmm.
made like a logo, business cards, I jazzed everything up, and I went to this job fair in London, and they had people like Ubisoft there, Splash Damage, all these kinds of games developers.
Oh wow.
And I'd never like approached these big studios before. So I spoke to Ubisoft, and I was just like, sheepishly with my CV, sort of like, hello, yeah, I'm Ed Coates, I'm a designer, here's my stuff. And right away, they were just like, wow, those are some amazing business cards. And, that was like the biggest compliment I ever had at that point in my life, and it was just incredible. And it sort of made me think like, wow, maybe I'm good. Maybe there is something to all this, Um, so yeah, like through I didn't get any jobs for anyone at there, but it was way too early for that. But it was lovely, talking to those studios and getting that kind of feedback early, because it gave me a lot of confidence. So yeah, from that, I just with my new branding, I found lots more clients, and it just grew and grew and grew over the years. Last year, it went from like 5 to 100 in terms of scale. So first I worked on Dark Table, which is like it was a Kickstarter project, and we got to work with like the voice actress who plays Bulbasaur in the Pokemon TV show, which is random. Another one of those keywords. I was using that as like a keyword to like impress people, but like
It works.
I
That's
thought it was
impressive.
cool. Before we leave, that came next, and that at that point that was the biggest thing I've worked on. Then I got to collaborate with a director at Lucasfilm and Marvel on an RPG, which hasn't been announced yet. Hasn't been nothing's happened with that yet. But we had the pixel artist who worked on Octopath Traveler on that one. So that was really, really cool. Then I got to work for a small Chinese mobile studio called Frenzu, and like their last game had like millions of downloads. So that was a big deal for me. And it was really funny because all the while I was like storing these things up in my head, like, wow, like this has happened, I can say all this stuff. And then I got to work. Sorry, then another one. And then I got to work with a studio called Lunaris Games, and that was my first Switch game. So that was for an LGBT visual novel called When the Night Comes. So that's coming out on Switch this year. Again, that was like the biggest thing I worked on. And then someone from BAFTA Crew, which is like a oh god, this is the thing. This is why I can't tell this story.
No, this is a great story. Keep going, because you're almost at the present. So finish it up.
So yeah, so someone at BAFTA, which is like it's like a group of practitioners in the games industry. Like I joined them, and then they introduced me to Double 11, and they said like, do you want to apply for a job here, kind of thing. And at the time I was really happy in freelance, and I was a bit like, do I want to join a studio, kind of thing. I saw what they've worked on, and I was like, oh god, they've worked on Minecraft Dungeons, oh god. kind of thing. So I've got to say yes now, kind of thing. So I applied for the job. First I did an art test. I completely aced the art test, thanks of course to a wonderful website called the Game UI Database, which gave me lots of references. And because I was making it at the time as well. And then I did the interview, and I'd noticed just how far I'd come in that time as well. Like I was so confident in that interview. Like I just knew exactly what I was talking about. I knew all these games up the back of my hand, and I got the job. So 6 months later, yeah. So 6 months later, this is my dream job, 100%. Like I have to pinch myself every day. I can't believe I'm in this role.
Wow, and you have the Game UI database that's picked up traction, that's been mentioned by all the biggest gaming publications, and that's growing as well in parallel. It's a crazy time. You're at your peak right now.
Yeah, well, I hope not. I hope there's more up there.
It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. No, absolutely. No, I think you've found a really good balance, and you're obviously talented. So it's just gonna make you continue to rise. So I think what's really crazy about this is that you start off as a programmer, and I feel like a programmer and an artist are very much two opposing disciplines. Like they kind of use different areas of the brain.
Absolutely.
Being an artist is a lot more creative. Being a programmer is a lot more systematic. It's a lot more analytical. And I think that's really interesting how the Game UI database came about, because I think it's a combination of those skills. Do you feel like you miss programming at all now? Like, because you've been for the last 5 years kind of continuing down this path as an artist, do you feel like you miss the skill set that programming had?
I always say I do, but then whenever I do some programming, I'm just like, oh my god, this is why I left this crap. Like, oh my god, this is the worst. Because like there's a great deal of programming like involved in the database. Because there's a lot of back end stuff going on.
Yeah.
And oh my god, like thing is, I was a programmer. Yes. Was I good at it? No, I was terrible at it. So I manage, and first and foremost, I'm a creative rather than a coder, I think.
Yeah,
So
that is really interesting. And you've mentioned what I love actually about your posts about the game UI database is you don't just show what the different screens are. You actually explain the reasoning behind what you believe the motivation is. Like I just saw the one you posted recently about the Kirby game and about how the tribal designs that they have and how that speaks to the kind of the lore of the game and the kind of adventure of the game. And what I really, really love is that it's, that's what I love about art and creativity is that there's reasons behind everything. You're expressing yourself and entrenching the story deeper through UI. And I'd love to know like how UI can help a game. So like how you think if you were approached with a new IP, say Sonic the Hedgehog, I don't know, and you're creating a game for that, like how could you apply your creativity to, if someone listening was a UI artist and they wanted to be more creative in their work, how can they apply more creativity to their work as a UI artist? If there's any advice you can give for that.
So it's important to look at the world you're trying to build, because the UI isn't just an interface for playing the game. It's also an extension of the world itself. So Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, a lot of so Sonic Forces. I wasn't a massive fan of the game, but the UI is one of my favorite UIs of all time, I'd say. So it takes this. So let me get this right. It takes inspiration from a Russian art style called constructivism, which is sort of like, it's very sort of like propaganda-y kind of thing, sort of old style propaganda. And of course that fits into the storyline of Sonic Forces, which is all about like Dr. Robotnik has taken over the world, Dr. Eggman, sorry, has taken over the world, and basically kidnapping animals and forcing them to work as slaves for all robots and all that kind of stuff. So it really fits in with that. But not only that, you have this half-tone effect going on, which you usually see in like comic books. So just by saying those two things, you know what you're dealing with. You've got a comic style world with this sort of like oppressive atmosphere. Two things which wouldn't normally go together, but with UI, it fits because you're making something for a game. So just knowing the sort of the intention behind why a lot of games have done this, it really helps when making your own UIs for games.
Yeah, totally. I love that because I feel like UI on its own is such a, like you've proven it with the UI database that there's just so much inspiration to draw from, so many references and work that people are doing around the world that is worth talking about. It's worth creating its own story just on. It's like you almost want to see like a UI like games festival or like an awards ceremony just for UI, because there's so many different examples of people being creative through UI.
I'm all for that. There should definitely be an award ceremony for UI.
Totally. I'd like, and I could talk to you about this every like all day. Are there any other examples in the last year of a game that's created a UI that's kind of pushing the limits and the innovation of what's possible? Is there one game that comes to mind that you want to talk about?
So a really, really famous example is of course Persona 5, which has this so I always say when creating a structure for a UI, you should never try to reinvent the wheel, right? Because there's not a lot of variety in the structure of the UIs. In the looks, sure, but in the structure of them and the way they function, there's not a lot of variation. Because if you had every game functioning completely differently, people wouldn't know how to use them. So Persona 5 threw those rules out the window and was like, we're going to make something completely new, and it works, unbelievably.
Cool.
And it looks so good. It looks incredible. Have you played Persona 5?
No, I haven't. And I haven't actually seen the page either. So I'm definitely going to jump into that. after this.
Oh,
'Cause it sounds
anyone
really
listening,
interesting.
go to the Persona 5 page and just like go, ah.
That's so
But
cool.
yeah, it's got this sort of like again, it's like a very kind of graphic novel, comic book style thing, but it's not using that half tone, or it's not, nothing like that. Just these very kind of thick outlines
Mhm.
and these really bold colors like red and black, and yeah, it just looks like a graphic novel come to life.
That's cool.
And one of the things that I really find fascinating about that game as well is the art style for the actual game looks fairly generic compared to a lot of other games in that kind of genre.
Mhm.
It's just a very kind of generic JRPG, 3D, cartoonish kind of thing, but it's not cell shaded or anything like that.
Mhm.
But the UI completely hijacks the style of that game. And when you close your eyes and you think of that game, all you can think about is the UI.
Mhm.
So it's an incredibly powerful art form. It's something that a lot of people just completely underestimate. And if more indie devs invested in a great UI artist, they could take their game from, they could really just make it sing.
Yeah, totally. That's an interesting challenge because the UI does serve a purpose, but it is also an opportunity to add to the experience of the player. So
Hmm.
it's definitely an interesting challenge that you need to have someone that's committed. It can't really be an afterthought unless you want just basic boxes and it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a really interesting um,
Hmm.
thing to look into. You mentioned UX before, and I'd love to know your definition, like between UI and UX. Like, what is the difference? I think you could do a better job than I could, but I think a lot of other people could, like, just hear the difference in what, because I kind of see those words mixed sometimes as well.
So UX is essentially the structure. So like when I was talking about the structure a minute ago, that's essentially UX.
Yeah.
So say you've got like you have you have different types of title screen. For example, you might have a list where you have just like a list of like continue new game options. That you see that in a lot of older games.
Yeah.
You might have a tile system where you have like big square tiles where you select the option, or you might have a radial menu.
Hmm.
A circle menu where all these kinds of things are part of the user experience, the way they experience the UI.
Hmm.
That's a very simplistic term of it because it's a massive rabbit hole. The whole UX side of things. There are UX researchers, uh, you know,
Hmm.
UX specialists who can do a far better job than I can being a UI and UX person. So,
Yeah.
but the UI, that's where you turn that structure into something beautiful.
Gotcha.
So that's where you can apply like either a flat design or a skeuomorphic design. We have something like it's based on like 3D objects. So like a lot, I talk a lot about paper interfaces on Twitter.
Hmm.
That's skeuomorphic, for example, like paper panels and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, like you have, yeah, UX is essentially the structure, UI is the aesthetics.
Gotcha. So yeah, so you're really leaning into the art and creative sides of UI. Like that's like, would you
I,
say
I
that?
do
Yeah.
I do a lot of UX as well, but I'm just hesitant to call myself a UX designer because there are actual UX designers out there who
Yeah.
go, who've done like psychology degrees and they do much more in-depth research than I've done.
Hmm.
They're like the UX superheroes. I'm just like the psychic.
Yeah. Does the game UI database speak on does UX at all?
Yeah. So if you go down on the left side of the page, you have all different screen types. Those are essentially the structure of each page, so you can create wireframes out of those.
Gotcha.
And the wireframe is essentially like the backbone of UX when it comes to planning your UI.
Hmm. Yeah, gotcha. Oh, that's really cool. What a cool resource. Going more into the database, what is your current process? Like, how do you balance? Do you buy every game that you do it on? Do you take kind of public feedback? What's your process now for updating and maintaining the page?
So yeah, buy the games. I don't buy them just for the UI. I happen to play a lot of games anyway. So that's a lie. I did buy a couple of games just for the UI. But yeah, I mean, there's also like Game Pass and there's PlayStation
Mm.
Now and there's all different kinds of ways of obtaining those games. And I also get a lot of contributions from the public as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there, and
That's cool.
I've actually got, so at the moment on there's 420 games, something like that. There's actually about 550 on the server, just they just haven't been released yet. So
Wow.
there's a lot more to come.
So that's cool. So you're just kind of drip feeding it, like releasing one every few days or one every week kind of thing?
Yeah, because like, well, I mean, I've been working on this since last April. So it got to a point where like I had too many games,
Hmm.
and it was getting to the point where I was like, okay, I need to stop tagging games and finish the website. Like, this is this is getting ridiculous. So that's why it launched with like 225 when the initial plan was to launch with like 120
Yeah.
or something like that. It just kept on going,
Wow.
and now now it's going even more.
Can you talk a bit more about the inception of that idea, and like what was the first game that you took screenshots for? I always love speaking about the kind of beginning phase of what led you down this journey.
Oh, the first game was Sonic Mania.
Cool.
Sonic Mania. Yeah, it's one of my favorite games, and the UI is really stunning. So like when I was really interested in color theory, that it was one of those games that I was sort of like looking at really, really closely and thinking like, why does it work so well? Like these colors are random as hell. Like, why
Mm,
do they work so well together? Yeah, it's just like it's one of those like master classes in graphic design. I think that game.
that's so
So
cool.
yeah.
No, I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm sure you'd love to work on a Sonic game one day, right? That's
Oh God, yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah,
it sounds like that's yeah, like a key thing. So yeah, talking
yeah.
about Double 11, when I was researching Double 11, it sounded confusing because they're a developer and a publisher, and they've got their fingers in so many different games and helping them port to different consoles and things. And I'd love to know, just from your perspective on the inside, if you could explain a bit more about Double 11 as a company, and then also if you can share any of the projects that you're working on at the moment.
I can't share anything at the
That's
moment.
fine. That's
I
fine.
can
But
literally not. Yeah, I can't share anything at all.
I understand, yeah. But so do you like Minecraft Dungeons and Rust? Are they developed by Double 11, or are they just in
Um,
collaboration?
they're sort of like collaborations, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting because like publishing is such a big part of a game's like journey, and uh, like the fact that Double 11 kind of does both is fascinating for such a giant industry, for them to kind of be a part of such a big part of the process. But yeah,
Mm.
no, that's really interesting. I'm excited to see the projects that you're working on once they're announced and once they're underway. I can't wait to see the kind of work that you're doing there.
Mm.
So when you mentioned the BAFTA crew and the work that you're doing for them, did you do any talks around that? I think I read that you were a public speaker, and I'd just love to know what you kind of spoke about and what the yeah, what the kind of stories you told then.
So basically, one of the one of the things I left out of my journey story earlier, I joined this thing called BAFTA Crew, which is a big it's a group run by BAFTA for practitioners in the games industry.
Cool.
It's essentially like a big networking group for people who wanting to get into the industry, or people in the industry who want to get higher and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I've met some amazing friends in that group. Some of my sort of they'll be friends for life now, kind of thing.
Nice.
And yeah, so like I've had a few opportunities through BAFTA to do talks and give portfolio reviews to students, because I'm very interested now in sort of like teaching people.
Hmm.
So like going back to the whole programming thing as well, like I'm very interested in, because I've got this programmery kind of mind, and this very analytical mind. I'm very good at teaching other people who don't know how to design how to design.
Mm.
So that's one of the things I'm very, very interested in sort of putting forward. So I do a lot of talks like that. I did a lecture at Bolton University not last year. Last year we were in lockdown. The year before last, where I sort of I did this very in-depth talk on UI, and I was meant to do more last year, but then there was a virus. This whole thing happened, and yeah, it's I've got like a 4-part lecture coming up next month at
Wow.
Suffolk University. So yeah, I'm still doing it. It's just it's been a sort of slow process with the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, but.
Totally.
Yeah, BAFTA have given me a few opportunities to do that, and I spoke at EGX, which is like a big expo for games in the UK. Something I've been visiting like since I was a kid. So like to go there and actually speak as a speaker there was absolutely insane, absolutely
That's so
incredible.
cool.
Yeah, incredible.
Congrats, that's awesome. And
Yeah,
it sounds like it's only just the beginning of your kind of teaching journey. So that's really cool.
yeah, definitely.
From your experience back when you're working on indie games, is there any, because I personally haven't worked on any indie projects. I kind of went into the gaming industry at like a studio level, so my perspective is very high level.
Mm.
And I'm not a programmer either, so but I am very interested in the kind of indie community, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on where the kind of indie community stands at like a global level or in the gaming industry, and what challenges an indie game has. Like what are the most challenging things for an indie game to be published or finished nowadays based on your experience?
So the indie side of the industry has obviously grown a lot over the last few years. It was a lot easier to get noticed a few years ago. So now one of the bigger challenges is just getting noticed,
Mm,
and Twitter's good for that, but there's also an element of luck to that as well, because you have to be, you have to kind of like trend and whatever. So people aren't just, especially like these small one person studios, they're not just games developers anymore. They're now just the marketers
yeah.
and social media gurus, and it all gets a bit kind of stressful. Especially like us being designers and games developers, we're not the most extroverted of people, so it can be that can be really hard.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's the bigger challenge, just getting noticed. And then you can get funding from various places. I mean, the government run a scheme in the UK where they give funding to certain projects. But even then, it's like it's a crapshoot as to whether you get it
Yeah,
or not. So yeah, those are the bigger challenges really.
yeah.
But then there are a lot of upsides to working as an indie studio as well, because you don't have to. I mean, unless you have like investors, then shareholders and all that kind of thing, you don't really have to answer to anyone, so you can
Mm,
you can put the creativity first. You can be a little bit more experimental with your game, because a lot of AAA games nowadays, they don't really take risks. So you tend to find a lot of the risks come from smaller indie projects.
mhm.
um, and yeah, of course, and you can sleep till 12.
Yeah, totally. You live on by your own rules.
I miss
No.
that. I miss that so much. It's the worst thing about joining the studio, getting up early. Like, oh my god, what's 9 a.m.?
Yeah. Who knows? One day you might be running your own studio, and you can rock up at work at 1 p.m. in the
Oh,
afternoon.
it'd be wicked.
What advice do you have to give for anyone wanting to enter into the industry as a UI artist? Say that they have been playing games since they were a kid, and maybe they're still in school, but they're really passionate about UI and arts and being creative. What advice would you give for them to enter into the industry?
Okay, I have loads of advice. Right. So the main thing is that UI is a growing part of the industry. It's a brand new field essentially. So there's loads of work out there. There's
Mhm.
loads of work out there for UI artists, but we don't have enough of them. So please become a UI artist. Please join us. And if you're going to make a portfolio for UI, make sure it's for just UI. No, because
Mm,
as I always say, like you don't want to go like where would you if you want to buy a pizza, do you go to like a pizza specialist place, or do you go to a place that does kebab, Chinese, Indian,
yeah.
fish and chip pizza? You want to go to a place that just does pizza. So make sure if you're going to focus on UI, make sure it's not UI slash concept artist slash artist, all that kind of, make sure it is solely a UI portfolio.
Yeah.
Um, Use your spare time to remake existing UI. So go on the database, for example, look on there for references, and like don't try and make your own thing. Just copy one for one the thing that you like the look, anything that you like the look of on there.
Hmm.
Obviously, not to release, but just to practice, because just copying other people's work in your own free time, it helps you kind of break down the process, and it helps you sort of get into the mindset of the designer who made that project. So
Totally.
that's one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given. And I still every now and then when I get a bit of free time, like I'll go and think, oh, that looks really cool, and then I'll try and remake it, and then I think, oh, okay, I've learned something new here because I can do this. Yeah, so those are the main things.
Hmm.
The other thing is like just be patient. It's not, it's for me, I'm 36. It took me this long to get my first job in a major studio. It's not a quick thing by any means. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Mhm.
So take your time. Don't get stressed if you get any rejections. It doesn't mean that you're rubbish. It just means you're not there yet.
Mhm.
So you can only get better, right? So and at some point you'll get so good that you'll just be irresistible to a studio, and they'll hire you. Um, so I think I've covered everything.
No, that's all really, really good actionable advice. It's really powerful.
I've got more. I've got more. Sorry, I've got more.
Yeah, go for it, go for it.
So one of the big things I do I have a rolling diary of problems that I run into as a UI designer as well,
Hmm.
because I still get like writer's block, the designer's version of writer's block. We all do. We all get that. We all get days where we're like, oh my god, am I rubbish? Do I know what I'm doing? Kind of thing. It's completely normal. So what I do when I have that feeling is I go to my little diary thing and I write in there what I'm stuck on. I say like, this is the screen I'm stuck on. I put like a screenshot and I'll write the specific problem. And then what I'll do is I'll do a combination of looking at references for like research. I might do some Googling. I might look at some stuff on YouTube, or I might ask someone for advice, for feedback. And eventually I will come to the solution. I will always come to the
Mhm.
solution. It might take a day, a month, whatever. I will come to the solution. And then I write down that solution.
Mhm.
So you have a diary of all the problems you've ever encountered, and then all the solutions you've made
Mhm.
or found. And so it has two purposes. One, it's a really great reminder of your progress. So like when you go back on the diary and see how far you've come, and when you start freaking out about things, you can be like, oh, I was freaking out about that, like what kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that if I was freaking out about that and I got over that, I'm going to get over this. So it's a great reminder of that. Second, it's a really good reference guide for like when you come into that same problem again, because like again, like I've got like 6 years of experience and I still find the same problem sometimes, where you get you look at something for so long, you lose perspective, and then you sort of think like, I can't remember how to art. I can't remember what I'm doing. And then you just look back and you think, oh yeah, I've just got to do that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a really valuable piece of advice that I give like everyone.
Mm.
Even programming, it works, I think, probably. But yeah, have a diary.
Yeah.
Keep track of
No, it's a
your
great piece of advice, because I think a lot of people, when they don't have those systems in place, when they suffer with self-doubt and they get stuck, they give up. And it sounds
Mm,
like you've mastered that process for yourself, so that you don't let the kind of inner demons take you down and make you go down
mm.
this well of despair. So
Yeah.
that's a
I
cool
still get
system.
days like that. I had one
Yeah.
like last week, and even now I'm writing stuff in there. So
Yeah, it's part of the creative process. That's yeah. If you're
yep,
going to get into any art form or any form of creativity, then be prepared to have to convince yourself why you're doing it on a weekly
yep,
basis.
yep.
Totally. No, that's really cool. And one of the final questions I have is what resources, uh, what tools do you use for creating your work? Because I'm not really familiar with UI in the sense of like what tools would I use? Would it just be Photoshop, and like how do you actually create the UI if you were practicing, or if you're creating it for a real game as well?
So my main tools are Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop.
Yeah.
I've also been using Adobe XD recently. So those are my main things. I can appreciate not everyone can get the Adobe suite because it can be quite expensive.
Hmm.
So there are free alternatives out there. I'm blanking on what they are because it's been a very long time since I've used
Yeah,
those.
Photop is one, paint.net.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's a ton of
yep.
online free ones.
Yeah. But essentially, you want a vector tool for wireframing because it's nice and easy and it's quick
Gotcha.
to edit. And then you want to use a raster tool like Photoshop to make everything look good. And then sometimes you might want to go back to Illustrator to come up with quick ideas and things.
Mm,
It's just about finding the right case for each bit of software,
yeah.
really, and yeah, see what works for you, really.
Figma is another tool that I've used sometimes for like
Ah,
design
yes,
stuff.
Figma is very good. Yeah, Figma, great.
And it's free. But do you think that there's an opportunity? Like, do you think there's a gap in the market for a game centric editor, an Illustrator type tool?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, you can do everything in Photoshop and Illustrator, of course, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are definitely things that are exclusive to the games industry that could be sort of like honed in on, I
Mm.
suppose. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How do you feel about game engines and how like Unreal and Unity take care of UI? Like, where do you see UI in terms of their selection of tools?
I haven't really used Unity or Unreal well, a lot for implementing UI.
Gotcha.
With my very limited experience of doing that with Unity, it's not great. That's with vanilla Unity when you're using it just like as it comes out the box kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there are plugins and assets that you can download that make the job a lot easier.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's funny because like working when I was in freelance, like a lot of my clients are obviously not experienced with UI at all because they paid me to do that.
Mhm.
So like I was asking them like, can you put a stroke on this text? And they're like, no. Like, how do we do that? Like you can't put a stroke on it. So like I was being limited by what I thought Unity couldn't do.
Gotcha.
But it turns out you have to download like assets to add a stroke to your text, which just seems balmy to me.
Yeah, no, totally. There's an
Mm.
interesting gap in kind of tools because I mean creating a game is a collection of so many different areas of art and programming and design and all that. There's so many problems to solve in each individual area. Um,
Mm.
no, that's really interesting. And one like final high level question that I have, which I love asking all the guests that come on the show, this is like, where do you see gaming in the future? Like, where do you see it going? What kind of trends are you seeing for different types of games that are being created at the moment?
I don't know. I mean, UI is going to get better.
Totally. No, I believe that. I believe that.
I don't know really. I really don't know. It's a very very unpredictable industry. VR. I mean, we
Mm,
thought VR would take off, kind of thing. I mean, it kind of is, but it also kind of isn't. So there's no way of knowing where that's going to go. Um, I think consoles might start heading towards more of a kind of like upgrade model,
mhm,
where you have like rather than have PS5, PS6, PS7, it'll be more like this year's version of the PS5 or whatever,
mm,
possibly because there was some talk of that.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, I really don't know.
No, that's interesting though, and you talking about VR just makes me think that for UI specifically, the different types of thoughts that you need to have when it comes to building something for mobile or a console or VR is a completely
Mm.
different set of skills and answers and problems that you encounter. So that's definitely an interesting space that I'm sure
That's actually
you're
really.
deep into.
I was going to say it's actually really funny. I was planning on putting VR games up on the database, but like obviously with the helmet on, I couldn't take the screenshots. So I had this like voice activation thing in the background. So like I was like shouting, screenshot, and then sometimes I wouldn't get my voice right, and I was just like shout like screenshot, screenshot, and then
Yeah.
like the other person in the house were like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, so yeah, even VR needs to catch up in terms of just taking a screenshot of the UI that you can see. Maybe in
Yeah,
the future we'll see a 360 game UI database where it's just purely on the VR headset and you can kind of browse through different UIs and different games within the
that's a
headset.
very cool idea. I like that. It's a
Yeah.
very cool idea.
But no, it's cool. I mean, you've definitely made me think about UI in a deeper way, made me respect the creativity behind it. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and your story. I'm sure you're inspiring to other UI artists that want to grow in the industry, and I think you provide an amazing resource for UI artists that want to explore and learn because it's you're not just showing examples, you're actually explaining the reasoning behind the choices, and that is the teachable moment. That's the kind of
Mm.
the creativity behind it. So I really admire that. I think you're doing an amazing job. I'm excited to see where the Game UI database grows to. I'm excited to see what projects you're working on at Double 11. So thanks for coming on. If anyone's interested in connecting with Ed, you can find him on Twitter at Ed Coates. That's EDDCOATES, or edcoatesdesign.com. Is that website still available from your?
Yeah, it's still up, but there's like a big notice like saying I don't work anymore. Like,
Yeah, you're
got a
not
job,
for
go
hire.
away.
Yeah. No, that's cool. But yeah, get in touch with Ed if you have any questions or thoughts, or if you just want to follow the Game UI database journey. Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Ed, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Take care. Thanks.